She called him a loser husband. Then he became the youngest billionaire in the city. He is not ambitious, Vanessa said, lifting her champagne glass as though she were proposing a toast. He is just very good at making failure sound like a plan. The laughter around the table was soft, polished, and cruel. Daniel Cole sat beside her beneath the golden chandeliers of the Hawthorne Grand Hotel, one hand resting near a glass he had barely touched. Around them, the city's most successful executives discussed acquisitions, private islands, and the inconvenience of waiting 6 months for a custom sports car. Their suits were tailored. Their smiles were measured. Even their insults arrived wrapped in elegance. Vanessa's fingers glittered around the stem of her glass. Her wedding ring caught the light. Daniel looked at it for half a second before lowering his eyes. Richard Lawson, the host of the dinner, leaned back in his chair. He was the sort of man who never seemed to enter a room without claiming ownership of it. At 38, he had already inherited Lawson Global, expanded it across 3 countries, and turned his surname into a symbol printed on office towers, investment reports, and charity banners. He smiled at Daniel. "So what exactly are you working on these days?" Daniel knew the question was not curiosity. It was an invitation to perform. "A logistics platform," he said. Richard nodded slowly. "Software?" "Yes." "What does it do?" "It predicts disruptions in supply chains before they happen." One of the guests raised an eyebrow. "Like weather forecasting?" "More complicated." A few people chuckled. Vanessa sighed as if she had heard the explanation too many times. "He has been building it for 3 years." "4," Daniel corrected quietly. She turned toward him. "That makes it worse." The table laughed again, head on his shoulder, and whispered that one day they would look back on those nights and laugh. But time had passed. Bills had arrived. Promises had remained promises. Hope, when stretched too long, had begun to look like irresponsibility. Vanessa no longer saw the man working late into the night. She saw the car that broke down twice in 1 month. She saw rejected investor emails. She saw friends buying homes while they renewed another lease. And slowly, disappointment had replaced tenderness. Richard tapped one finger against the table. "Have you made any revenue?" "Not yet." "Any investors?" "Not yet." "Any customers?" Daniel paused. "I am testing with small data sets." Richard smiled. "So no." The guests laughed once more. Daniel looked at Vanessa. She did not defend him. Instead, she reached into her handbag and placed a white envelope beside his plate. The movement was so calm that for a moment he thought it was a hotel receipt. Then he saw the law firm's name. The laughter faded. Vanessa folded her hands. "I filed yesterday." Daniel did not touch the envelope. A waiter passed behind them carrying a silver tray. Somewhere near the ballroom entrance, a violinist began a new song. The city continued glowing beyond the tall windows. "You brought divorce papers to dinner?" Daniel asked. Her expression remained composed. "I did not want another argument at home. I have never argued with you about this. That is part of the problem." Richard looked away, suddenly interested in his drink. Vanessa lowered her voice. "I cannot keep living inside your potential." The sentence struck harder than the laughter. Daniel looked at the envelope again. For years, he had imagined his success as a doorway they would walk through together. He had never considered that she might leave before he found the key. "You made your decision?" he asked. "Yes." "And there is nothing I can say?" She studied him. "If there were, you would have said it years ago." Daniel nodded once. He picked up the envelope. Then he stood. A few guests avoided his eyes. Others watched with the fascination people reserved for accidents they were relieved had happened to someone else. Vanessa looked, almost disappointed by his calmness. "That is it. What would you like me to do?" "Fight for us." Daniel looked at her for a long moment. "I have been fighting for us." Her face tightened. "No, Daniel. You have been fighting for an idea." He placed the envelope inside his jacket. "Maybe." Then he glanced around the table. "Enjoy your dinner." Richard lifted his glass with a faint smile. "Good luck with the software." Daniel met his eyes. "Thank you." He walked away before anyone could see his hands trembling. Outside, rain had begun to fall. The hotel doorman offered him an umbrella, but Daniel shook his head and stepped into the night. Cold water darkened his suit within seconds. He crossed the street while taxis sprayed rainwater against the curb. Behind him, the hotel windows glowed like another world, warm, golden, unreachable. He reached his old Honda and sat behind the wheel without starting the engine. The divorce papers rested against his chest. For several minutes, he listened to the rain strike the roof. He thought about going back. Not to beg, just to ask Vanessa if there was still something left to save. Then he remembered her expression when the table laughed. Not embarrassment. Relief. As if humiliating him had finally made leaving easier. Daniel started the car. The engine coughed twice before turning over. By the time he reached the apartment, the rain had soaked through his shirt. The rooms felt larger without Vanessa, though most of her clothes were still in the bedroom. A half-empty bottle of perfume stood on the dresser. 2 coffee mugs rested beside the sink. Their wedding photograph still hung near the hallway. Daniel turned it face down. Then he sat at the kitchen table and opened his laptop. His bank account held $814. The rent was due in 12 days. 3 investor rejection emails waited in his inbox. One began with the words, "Interesting concept, but not commercially viable." Another advised him to seek employment with an established technology company. The third contained only 2 sentences. "The market is not ready. Neither are you." Daniel read them all. Then he opened the software. Atlas appeared on the screen as lines of code, data maps, and unfinished models. It was ugly, slow, unreliable. But buried inside it was something he could see even when no one else could. A system capable of learning how goods moved across the world. A system that could detect patterns human planners missed. A system that might prevent companies from losing millions because one shipment, one storm, or one closed port had arrived without warning. For 4 years, Daniel had built it between temporary jobs and unpaid bills. Tonight, it was the only thing that had not left him. He worked until sunrise. At 5:17 a.m., Atlas identified a bottleneck in a test dataset 11 hours before the original company had recorded it. Daniel stared at the result. He ran the model again. The same warning appeared. Then again, the same result. He leaned back slowly. Outside, the rain had stopped. A pale line of morning light appeared between the buildings. For the first time that night, Daniel smiled. 3 weeks later, he received an email from Mercer Logistics. The message came from Samuel Mercer himself. "I reviewed the demonstration you submitted last year. My operations director says your projections are unrealistic. I would like you to prove him wrong." Daniel arrived at Mercer's warehouse wearing the same suit he had worn to the dinner, now carefully cleaned and pressed. The sleeves were slightly too long. His shoes had been polished until the worn leather almost looked new. Samuel Mercer met him near the loading docks. He was 63, broad-shouldered, silver-haired, and unimpressed by almost everything. "Daniel Cole." "Yes." "You are late." Daniel checked his watch. "I am 7 minutes early." Samuel nodded. "Good answer." He led Daniel through a warehouse filled with forklifts, pallets, and shouting supervisors. The air smelled of diesel, cardboard, and coffee. Samuel pointed toward a glass office above the warehouse floor. "My company loses money every week because shipments arrive late, drivers wait too long, and managers notice problems after they happen." Daniel followed him upstairs. "If Atlas works," Samuel continued, "I want to know before the problem reaches my loading dock." Daniel placed his laptop on the table. "I need access to your historical data. You have 2 hours. I need 2 days. You have 2 hours." Daniel looked through the glass wall at hundreds of workers moving below. Then he opened the laptop. "Fine." Samuel left him alone. For the next 118 minutes, Daniel cleaned corrupted files, corrected mislabeled routes, and built a temporary integration into Mercer's system. His fingers moved faster than his thoughts. Sweat gathered beneath his collar. When Samuel returned, Daniel turned the screen toward him. "There will be a major delay on Route 14 tomorrow afternoon." Samuel glanced at the map. "Why?" "Bridge maintenance. My managers know about that." "Not this one." Daniel enlarged the route. "A secondary closure will redirect traffic through East Mill. It begins at 1:30. Your trucks will reach the area at 1:45. Samuel frowned. "That closure is not in our system. It is in municipal permit records. That does not mean it will happen." Daniel closed the laptop. "Then do nothing." Samuel stared at him. The next afternoon, the East Mill closure began at 1:32. Mercer rerouted its trucks 20 minutes earlier and avoided an estimated $70,000 in penalties. Samuel called Daniel at 2:05. "How soon can you install Atlas?" Daniel looked around his apartment, at the unpaid bills, the empty rooms, and the wedding photograph still face down in the hallway. "Monday." The pilot agreement was small, barely enough to cover his debts. But it was real. Daniel rented a narrow office above a bakery where the smell of bread rose through the floor every morning. He hired one programmer, then another. They worked on folding tables because proper desks cost too much. Atlas failed often. Servers crashed. Models produced impossible predictions. One update accidentally rerouted 11 trucks to a closed warehouse. Daniel slept on the office couch for 3 nights until the problem was fixed. But each week, the software became better. Mercer Logistics reduced delays by 12%. Then 19. Then 27. Drivers stopped waiting for instructions after disruptions happened. Managers received warnings before storms, labor shortages, equipment failures, and port closures. Losses fell. Profits rose. Samuel introduced Daniel to another company. Then another. Within a year, Atlas served 32 regional logistics firms. Daniel moved out of the old apartment. Not into a penthouse. Into a smaller, cleaner place near the office. He replaced the Honda only after it died permanently at an intersection. He bought a used sedan. His first expensive purchase was a new server. Meanwhile, Vanessa entered the life she had believed she wanted. Richard invited her to charity galas, private clubs, and weekends at houses overlooking the sea. She wore dresses that arrived in black boxes and dined in restaurants where menus had no prices. At first, everything felt like proof that she had made the right decision. Richard never worried about rent. He never spoke about dreams that might fail. He never needed her patience. But he also rarely needed her. He took calls during dinner. He traveled without asking whether she wanted to join him. When she spoke about her work, he listened just long enough to respond politely. Nothing was wrong. That was what disturbed her. Their life was elegant, comfortable, and strangely empty. One morning, while scrolling through business news, Vanessa saw Daniel's name. The headline read, "Local software company cuts shipping delays across the region." The photograph showed him standing inside a warehouse beside Samuel Mercer. His suit was inexpensive. His hair needed cutting. But his expression was different. He looked tired and happy. Vanessa read the article twice. Atlas had signed contracts with several national distributors. Industry analysts called the technology unusually accurate. Investors were beginning to pay attention. She closed the page before Richard entered the room. For the first time since the divorce, she wondered whether Daniel had been failing at all. Perhaps he had only been early. Atlas grew quietly at first. Then suddenly, a winter storm closed 3 major ports along the coast. Competing logistics companies lost hundreds of millions in delayed shipments. Atlas clients had rerouted cargo days earlier. News spread internationally. Investment firms that had once ignored Daniel began sending representatives. One offered $12 million for control of the company. Another offered 30. Daniel declined both. Samuel asked him why. They were sitting in Daniel's office, now located inside a renovated factory with 70 employees. "You could retire tomorrow," Samuel said. Daniel looked through the glass wall at engineers working late. "I do not want to retire. Then sell half. I do not want to lose control." Samuel smiled. "You finally sound like a founder." Daniel looked down at the latest Atlas map. "No," he spoke quietly. "I finally understand what I am building." The company expanded into rail freight, air cargo, and international shipping. Atlas did not simply predict delays anymore. It reorganized entire supply networks in real time. Within 3 years, more than 200,000 trucks, ships, and cargo units depended on its decisions. Daniel's name appeared on magazine covers he never posed for. Reporters called him mysterious because he refused to discuss his private life. Employees called him Daniel because he refused to be called Sir. Lawson Global noticed him too. Richard's company had been struggling with outdated infrastructure. Its logistics division was losing market share. The board wanted Atlas. Their first offer valued the company at $80 million. Daniel left it unanswered. The second offered $120 million. He declined. The third proposed a strategic partnership. Daniel refused that too. Richard studied the rejection letter in his office. It contained only one paragraph. Atlas was created to solve problems, not to become someone else's asset. "We appreciate your interest." Richard read the signature twice. Daniel Cole. He remembered the man at the dinner table. The old suit. The quiet voice. The software everyone had laughed at. Richard turned toward his financial director. "How much is Atlas worth now?" "Privately. Yes. Possibly $4 billion. Richard's expression hardened. And Daniel, based on his ownership, he will become the youngest billionaire in the city after the next funding round. Across the room, Vanessa stood near the window. She had come to discuss the details of their separation. Her relationship with Richard had ended without betrayal or scandal. They had simply reached the moment when neither could continue pretending comfort was the same as love. She had heard every word. Richard noticed her silence. You knew him better than anyone. Vanessa looked at the report on his desk. No, her voice was barely audible. I knew him before anyone did. That evening, she returned to her apartment and opened an old storage box. Inside were photographs, receipts, birthday cards, and a notebook Daniel had once filled with early atlas diagrams. On the first page, he had written, "Build something that gives people time to prepare." Vanessa traced the words with one finger. She remembered him explaining the idea at their kitchen table. She had been checking her phone. She remembered him promising that Atlas could change the way companies moved goods around the world. She had asked when it would start paying the electricity bill. Vanessa closed the notebook. Regret did not arrive like thunder. It entered quietly, through small memories she could no longer defend. The coffee he made every morning. The umbrella he carried for her even when rain was not forecast. The nights he slept on the couch because the light from his laptop disturbed her. She had called those nights obsession. Now the world called them vision. The announcement came on a Monday morning. Atlas had completed the largest private funding round in the city's history. The valuation reached $11 billion. Daniel Cole, 35 years old, officially became the city's youngest self-made billionaire. Employees filled the Atlas headquarters lobby, cheering when he arrived. Daniel stood beneath a massive screen displaying the news. For several seconds, he looked almost embarrassed. Then he raised one hand. The room became quiet. Nothing changed this morning, he said. A few employees laughed. The problems we were solving yesterday still exist today. Our customers still need us. Our code still has bugs. More laughter. Daniel smiled. So celebrate for 1 hour. He glanced at his watch. Then, get back to work. The cheering returned. That afternoon, dozens of luxury car dealers contacted his office. Real estate agents sent photographs of estates. Private banks invited him to exclusive meetings. Daniel bought none of it. Instead, he approved a scholarship program for young engineers from low-income families. He named it after his father. A month later, an ivory envelope arrived on his desk. Lawson Global 25th Anniversary Gala. The event would be held at the Hawthorne Grand Hotel. The same ballroom. The same chandeliers. The same room where Vanessa had placed divorce papers beside his untouched glass. Richard Lawson had written a note beneath the invitation. It would be an honor to welcome you. Daniel's assistant waited. Should I decline? He looked at the gold lettering. For years, he had avoided returning to that hotel. Not deliberately. He simply never saw a reason. Now he realized avoiding it was another way of allowing the past to choose his direction. No, he said. Accept it. On the night of the gala, cameras crowded the hotel entrance. Executives arrived in limousines. Politicians paused beneath the lights. Reporters called out names while guests entered the ballroom. Daniel arrived in a simple black sedan. His tuxedo fit perfectly, but nothing about him seemed designed to attract attention. No large security team surrounded him. No expensive watch glittered on his wrist. When he stepped through the doors, the room changed. Conversations softened. People turned. 3 years earlier, no one had known his name. Now almost everyone did. Richard crossed the ballroom to greet him. Daniel. He extended his hand. Thank you for coming. Daniel shook it. Congratulations on 25 years. Richard studied him for a moment. I owe you an apology. Daniel's expression remained calm. For what? I underestimated you. Daniel glanced toward the chandeliers. You were not the only one. Richard gave a faint smile. We should talk about Atlas. Tonight. Another time. Daniel nodded. Perhaps. They both understood the answer was probably no. Across the ballroom, Vanessa stood near a marble column. She wore a dark blue dress with no necklace, no dramatic jewelry, nothing like the woman who had once needed every room to notice her. Daniel saw her. Their eyes met. For a moment, the noise of the ballroom faded. She smiled carefully. He nodded. Then he turned to greet Samuel Mercer. Vanessa felt the loss with unexpected clarity. Daniel had not returned looking for her reaction. He had not returned to display his success. He had simply entered the room as a man who belonged wherever he chose to stand. The master of ceremonies called the guests to their seats. After dinner, Richard stepped onto the stage. He spoke about Lawson Global's history, its expansion, and its future. The speech was polished and confident. Then he paused. Tonight, we are honored to welcome someone whose work has transformed our industry. A spotlight moved across the ballroom and stopped on Daniel. Mr. Daniel Cole. Applause rose immediately. Richard smiled. 3 years ago, many of us believed the future of logistics would be built by companies that already controlled the market. He looked directly at Daniel. We were wrong. The applause grew louder. I would like to invite Mr. Cole to say a few words. Daniel had not been warned. Samuel leaned toward him. Go. Daniel stood. He walked to the stage without notes. Under the lights, the ballroom looked smaller than he remembered. He could see the table where he had once sat beside Vanessa. He could almost hear the laughter. Richard handed him the microphone. Daniel remained silent for several seconds. When I first entered this ballroom, he began, I believed success was something other people had the power to recognize. Vanessa lowered her eyes. I thought if the right investor believed in me, I would become valuable. If my wife believed in me, I would become capable. If successful people respected me, I would finally know I belonged among them. The ballroom became still. I was wrong. Daniel looked toward the Atlas employees seated near the stage. Success is built in rooms no one applauds. He spoke slowly. It is built at 2 a.m, when the code still does not work. It is built after rejection letters, after unpaid bills, after someone you love looks at your dream and sees only failure. Vanessa's fingers tightened around her glass. It is built when no one is watching. Daniel glanced toward Samuel. I owe my success to the people who believed in me. Then he looked across the ballroom. And I owe something to those who did not. A faint tension passed through the room. They taught me that borrowed belief is temporary. His voice softened. If your confidence depends on applause, silence will destroy you. If your worth depends on someone staying, their departure will break you. No one moved. The day my life changed was not the day Atlas earned its first dollar. Daniel looked toward Vanessa. Only briefly. It was the day I stopped asking other people to confirm that my dream deserved to exist. The silence lasted for 2 heartbeats. Then Samuel began applauding. Others joined him. Within seconds, the entire ballroom stood. Daniel handed the microphone back to Richard. He did not bow. He did not remain beneath the lights. He simply stepped off the stage. The applause followed him across the room. Vanessa watched him accept congratulations from people who had once ignored him. He smiled politely, but there was no triumph in his face. That was what hurt most. He had not come back to win. He had already won somewhere else. Later, Daniel walked onto the hotel balcony. Rain had begun falling over the city, turning the streets below into ribbons of reflected light. The doors opened behind him. He did not need to turn to know who it was. Vanessa stopped beside him. For a while, they listened to the rain. I am sorry, she said. Daniel looked over the railing. I know. I was cruel. Yes. She flinched at the honesty. I thought success had to be visible. Daniel nodded. You wanted security. I wanted more than that. She looked at him. I wanted people to envy my life. The confession hung between them. And when they looked at us, she continued, I was ashamed. Daniel remained silent. I was ashamed of the apartment, the car, your old suit. I thought those things proved you were not going anywhere. Her voice began to tremble. I never asked what they proved about me. Daniel finally turned toward her. You were unhappy. That does not excuse what I did. No, the word was gentle, but firm. Vanessa wiped a tear before it could fall. Did you hate me? For a while, I wanted to. But you did not. Daniel shook his head. Hate would have kept you in my life. The rain moved across the balcony in a fine silver mist. I spent so much time imagining the day you would regret leaving, he continued. I imagined becoming successful, walking into a room like this, and watching you realize you were wrong. Vanessa looked at him. And tonight? Tonight, I realized your regret does not change my life. The truth was not spoken as punishment. That made it sharper. She looked through the glass doors at the ballroom. I saw the news about the funding. Daniel smiled faintly. So did everyone. You became everything you said you would. No, he looked toward the Atlas building glowing across the skyline. I became something different. What? Free. Vanessa closed her eyes. For years, she had believed the opposite of love was anger. Now she understood. It was peace. Anger still needed the person who caused it. Peace did not. I wish I had believed in you, she whispered. Daniel thought for a moment. If you had, perhaps I would never have learned to believe in myself. She smiled through tears. You always know what to say now. No, he laughed softly. I simply stopped being afraid of saying the truth. The ballroom doors opened again. Music drifted onto the balcony. Daniel glanced inside. I should go. Vanessa nodded. Are you happy? He looked at the rain-covered city, at the streets he had once driven through in a dying car, at the hotel where his marriage had ended, at the office tower where hundreds of people now worked on an idea that had once existed only on his laptop. Yes, he said. There was no hesitation. Vanessa lowered her eyes. I am glad. This time, she meant it. Daniel extended his hand. She stared at it for a moment before placing hers inside. Their handshake was warm, brief, final. No reunion. No promise that life would return what pride had destroyed. Only the quiet respect of two people who had reached the end of the same story by different roads. Daniel released her hand. I hope you find what you are looking for. Vanessa looked at him. I think I am finally learning what that is. He nodded. Then he walked through the ballroom. Executives tried to stop him for conversations. Reporters waited near the entrance. Richard raised a glass from across the room. Daniel acknowledged them all and continued toward the doors. Outside, his driver hurried forward with an umbrella. Daniel waved him back. It is only rain. He stepped beneath the hotel lights. Water touched his shoulders and darkened the fabric of his tuxedo. Years earlier, he had left the same building carrying divorce papers against his chest. He had walked through the rain believing he had lost everything. Tonight, he carried nothing. He crossed the pavement slowly. Behind him, the chandeliers continued glowing. Ahead, Atlas headquarters rose above the skyline, its windows lit with engineers working late. Tomorrow there would be bugs to fix, contracts to review, problems no one had solved yet. Life would continue without dramatic music or standing ovations. Daniel preferred it that way. He opened the car door, then paused. For one moment, he looked back at the hotel. Not at Vanessa, not at Richard, at the building itself. The place no longer seemed powerful. It was only glass, stone, and memory. Daniel smiled. She had once called him a loser husband. The city now called him its youngest billionaire. But neither title defined him. One had been spoken to diminish him. The other had been given because people finally noticed what he had built. His worth had never belonged to either name. He entered the car. As it pulled away, the hotel disappeared behind the rain. Daniel did not look back again. The greatest revenge was not becoming richer than those who doubted him. It was becoming so at peace that he no longer needed them to notice.